Thank you for staying up late. It's about that time to kick it off for The Factor Uncensored, and we want to welcome you for joining us tonight. We start off with news that has social media, politicians, and fans in an uproar. Billionaire rapper Jay-Z is accused of raping a 13-year-old girl, along with Sean P. Diddy Combs. A Jane Doe in a lawsuit says the assault happened at an after party that was following the MTV Video Music Awards in New York City back in 2000. Jay-Z responded with a statement on X calling the allegations idiotic and an attempt at blackmail by a prominent Houston attorney that we all know, Tony Busby, who represents that Jane Doe in the lawsuit. Today, he filed a motion, that being Jay-Z, to dismiss the lawsuit. Busby also released a statement last night saying he sent a demand letter in an attempt to settle this case, and his client in the so-called blackmail attempt didn't talk about money in that demand letter. He also requested that the accuser identify herself publicly, that being from Jay-Z. Joining us to talk about it here on The Factor Uncensored are attorneys Oliver Brown, Bayoji Akingbala, and The Factor's digital producer Ajibola Buduran. Glad to have you all on The Factor Uncensored. First of all, your thoughts about this. It's getting ugly. And a major celebrity.
It's a major celebrity, and look, I'm not going to get into my personal beliefs. I know that Tony Busby, he's a world-known attorney, right? I want to know what made him feel compelled to go ahead and file this lawsuit and go about the way that he did it. I know that he wouldn't go about something that just be frivolous, so there must be something more to it. But I still am a little bit reserved as to this is supposedly happened 24 years ago, and it's just now coming out. It's only happening once the federal charges happen against.
Is it possible these could be powerful individuals we're talking about? Jay-Z, and only allegations, Jay-Z and P. Diddy, and that person, the so-called Jane Doe, didn't have the bravery to come forward and say this?
Well, I believe any 13-year-old being in those type of situations wouldn't have bravery to come forward against grown men that did that to him. So, I don't believe that that's going to be a determinative factor based off of the age. It's going to become, are they going to be able to prove how she got there and then that she was in fact there and that happened? And I think that's going to be a very steep hill to climb. It does come across a little bit, at an inconvenient time of filing this lawsuit. Why didn't this happen? Why wasn't the lawsuit filed 4 years ago after all the Bill Cosby things and things like that, when it has become more socially acceptable based off of the Me Too movement? So, again, a 13-year-old is not going to have the bravery to come forward at that time. So nobody should, shame a 13-year-old girl for going through something traumatic.
We just want to know if it's true.
And if it's true or not. Yeah. And then how can you prove it, And that's going to be a difficult task.
Bayoji, your thoughts on this?
I think one thing that Mr. Busby has in his favor is the standard by which the civil courts are going to have to weigh this. It's not a criminal case. They don't have to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to prove it by the preponderance of the evidence. And this means...
And for the average viewer who doesn't know what that means, what does that mean?
It just means that you have to prove more likely than not that it happened. Tipping the scale to, let's say, 51% in your favor with respect to the evidentiary standard. Now, Mr. Busby had a press conference a few months back, and during that press conference, he stated that the civil lawsuits that he was moving forward with were ones that were vetted by his office. He stated that he hired an investigator, that investigator gathered further corroborating evidence. And so I'm very curious to see what corroborating evidence he has that he thinks can meet that low burden of proof.
And Oliver, do you believe in these cases? Do you feel like Tony Busby wouldn't go to the courts or file a lawsuit without being properly vetted and seeing the evidence, some evidence that we're not privy to at this point?
Let's be very clear. Tony Busby already has a lot of money. He doesn't need... If he wanted to retire today and not take any more cases, he would be set for the rest of his life, and his children would too. So for him to take it on, I believe that he has to believe that there has to be some shred of credibility. I don't think that he's going to blow his credibility. He just defended the Texas Attorney General, so he has high credibility.
Former Governor Rick Perry.
Former Governor Rick Perry.
And civil lawsuit against our former quarterback in Texas.
So he has a history of taking on some big cases. I don't think that he would try to destroy his credibility just for, a couple extra coins in his pocket. So, there's got to be something that he has, that, or at least that he believes, has a good faith belief in it. Doesn't mean that it necessarily turns out to be true, but it had to be compelling to him in order for him to put his name behind it. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation with you guys in just a moment. Back to the Factor Uncensored. We continue our conversation with our panel about rapper and businessman Jay-Z being accused of rape of a 13-year-old accused. Okay, let's bring in Aji Budaran, who works for our social media and website here at Fox 26. What are people saying about this on social media? When you have high-profile celebrities involved in a scandal, they tend to side with the celebrity despite the preponderance of evidence. So your thoughts, what are they saying on social media right now with Jay-Z and Tony Busby?
So, my fellow panelists, they focused on the legal side, and I'm focusing more so on the court of popular opinion. And I think that people, they're taking sides, but I think on both sides there's some things that people are questioning. So, for example, with Jay-Z, there's a lot of people who are big fans of Jay-Z. We can't take that away from him, but they're choosing to either say we're going to stay out of it or we want to see what else comes out evidence-wise. But at the same time, there are people who look at his timeline of different things that have happened, such as his relationship with Beyonce and other women in the industry, and like the question of like what ages those women were and what his relationship with those women were, and like kind of saying, well, if that, where there's smoke, there's fire. But at the same time, with Tony Busby, some people look at him as somebody who's often targeted other high-profile celebrities. Sometimes people see him as a lawyer who is looking for a money grab, even though we already established that he doesn't necessarily need it. But in terms of how the public sees him, they think that he might just be targeting Jay-Z. In the other sense, Jay-Z put out a response pretty quickly, and most of his fans are used to him not responding at all, but he came out very quickly and aggressively, and for some people that was a red flag, because they're saying, well, if this is something that you're not usually responding to or you don't always pay attention to, why now when Busby, when the lawsuit came out, how a few minutes or a few hours later you already have a response, when typically things don't move that quickly. So I think a lot of people have opinions and they're questioning and they're trying to figure out their own way of sorting through all this information. But I think it's going to be hard to really see what side people fall on until we get more evidence. Because again, we talked about the Beehive. Some of them are saying Beyonce should have dropped him a long time ago because he's a liability. And we're seeing it now where he's wrapped up in this case and we don't know where it's going to go.
And of course, one of the things we did see his statement, one of the things that people said, Oliver, was that there was no flat denial in there, if you can recall that statement.
Yeah, okay. So,
and should he have flatly denied it publicly?
I thought his statement was fine. He came out aggressively, and he's like, hey, if you think I did something, you should, go ahead and have me charged, okay? Then he went on and explained, hey, I don't get down like that based off of the way that he's been raised and whatnot, based off of his, I guess, for lack of a better term, street culture. I did like the fact that Tony Busby instantly responded. So they're going head-to-head on this one. And
it sounds like both of them were prepared for it, waiting for it to come.
They were ready for it to drop. And so he may have got the upper hand. I believe that the new lawsuit is now filed in New York, which is going to be his home territory. And so he was prepared for it. I thought the statement was fine. I know he didn't categorically say this did not happen, but he was saying it, I guess, in more
roundabout way.
It's like, hey, this is ridiculous.
And really quick, do you think that statement was fine the last 20 seconds we have here?
Yeah, I thought he had a very full-throated response, Jay-Z, but Tony Busby came off very confident. He was very to the point. He said, the lawsuit speaks for itself, and we will litigate these facts in court.
All right. We'll talk about it later. We'll continue to follow this. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me.